Picture yourself trudging through a muddy medieval village, boots squelching the air thick with the scent of wood smoke, and something suspiciously like boiled cabbage. You're bone-tired, your cloak's damp, and the only thing keeping you upright is the promise of a warm fire and a mug of something that doesn't taste like regret. Up ahead, a rickety sign swings in the wind, creaking out the words, "The Rusty Tankard." This, my friend, is the medieval inn, a place where weary travellers' questionable stew and a thriving lice population collide in a symphony of chaos. It's not glamorous, but it's got a hearth, a roof, and enough stories to make you forget the blisters on your feet. So before you settle in, do me a favour, hit that like button if you're enjoying this, dive into the past, subscribe if you want more, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. It's wild to think we're all here, scattered across the globe, sharing this moment. Now dim the lights, maybe flick on a fan for that soothing hum, and let's step inside this grubby, glorious inn together. The door groans as you push it open, and the common room hits you like a slap smoky loud and smelling like a mix of stale ale, sweaty wool, and something that might have been a chicken once. Rough-hewn tables are crammed with travellers, a merchant clutching his coin purse like it's his firstborn, a bard tuning a lute with more enthusiasm than skill, and a monk muttering blessings over a mug he's definitely not supposed to have. The floor's sticky, the hearth crackles, and somewhere upstairs a groan echoes snoring or dying, it's anyone's guess. This isn't the polished tavern of fairy tales. Forget Hollywood's candle-lit charm. This is a place where the ale's weak, but boiled the bread's hard as a cobblestone, and half the guests are scratching something that's not an itch. Yet there's a strange warmth here, a stubborn joy in the clatter of mugs and the barmaid's sharp retorts. It's a haven for the road-weary, where you're as likely to find a brawl as a ballad, and both are equally entertaining. The inn's alive with characters who make it hum. There's the innkeeper, a grizzled man whose face says he's seen too many mornings and not enough miracles yet. He keeps the place running with a mix of grumbling and grit. Then there's Marjorie, the barmaid, who moves like a general in a battlefield of drunks, her tray a shield, her glare a weapon. She's the real boss here, dodging bad poetry and worse manners, with a wit sharper than the kitchen knife. And the guests. They're a parade of medieval life knights with rusty armour, pilgrims with blistered feet, and a bard who thinks his songs are worth more than gold they're not. Outside a mule brays and a chicken flaps past the window, probably plotting its next escape. This inn's not just a building, it's a stage where humanity's quirks play out from petty squabbles to fleeting friendships. So pull up a wobbly stool, sip the questionable ale, and let's see what this day brings, because in a medieval inn every moment's a gamble and the stakes are always high. You're still blinking the sleep from your eyes when a sneeze, wet loud, and entirely too close, jerks you awake. It's not so much that the innkeeper rises, it's that the world demands it. Downstairs, the floorboards groan under someone's stumble, followed by a crash, and the unmistakable squawk of that damn chicken bolting out the door again. The innkeeper, let's call him Hal, peels himself off his straw mattress like it's a personal insult. His room's a cramped nook above the common room, barely big enough for a bed and a peg holding his worldly possessions, a tunic, a belt, and a sock that's not his. The blanket smells like garlic, and last week's ale cosy in the way a damp sock is cosy if you've given up on better. It's dark out too early or too late. Medieval clocks aren't exactly ticking, and Hal's sleeve more sackcloth than linen, scrubs the grit from his face as he mutters something about guests and their cursed poultry. Dressing is a ritual of necessity, not vanity. Hal fumbles for his tunic, then his trousers, each movement creaking his joints like a bag of loose stones. His belt's gone missing again, but a quick shuffle finds it dangling behind the door next to a candle stub, and that mystery sock nobody claims it, and Hal's not asking. Questions before sunrise are a rookie mistake. He shuffles downstairs, stepping over a guest snoring under a table, a man so confident in his stupor he might have been born there. The common room's a mess, a tipped mug, a lone boot by the hearth, and a faint whiff of last night's stew which has evolved into something sentient. Hal stokes the fire with a poker, aiming for warmth. Not a blaze firewood's pricier than a good lie, and the last time he got ambitious someone tried roasting a goose indoors, feathers and all. He hangs a pot over the flames, ready to resurrect yesterday's pottage, when a mule's bray and the clump of boots outside signal new arrivals. Hal sizes in a patchwork of splinters and stubbornness, but it's his. Another day's dawning, and whether it's chaos or coin, he's ready mostly. You're nursing a mug of something warm and dubious in the corner of the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, buzzing with the kind of energy that comes from hunger and questionable life choices. Breakfast here isn't a meal, it's a battlefield where the guests negotiate with a bowl of pottage that's less food and more philosophy. The innkeeper Hal stands by the hearth ladling out scoops of a thick greyish sludge that smells like boiled oats wet leather, and a turnip that's seen better days. This is pottage, the medieval catch-all, not so much cooked as coerced into existence. Yesterday it had barley and some optimistic herbs. Today those same turnips are softer joined by bits of goose that didn't make it out of last night's chaos. Hal stirs the pot with a wooden spoon, older than half the village, muttering about guests who ask for fresh like it's a royal banquet. You take a sip of ale, weak, cloudy, but safer than the water, and wonder if this is cuisine or survival. The bread hits the table with a thud, each chunk hard as a blacksmith's hammer and just as forgiving. You cut it with a knife that's more rust than blade, chewing, slowly, partly to save your teeth, partly to contemplate why you didn't stay home. Around you, guests engage in their own breakfast duels, a merchant gnaws his loaf like it's a personal enemy, a pilgrim dunks hers in pottage and prays for mercy in the bard. Because there's always a bard, requests honey, as if honey isn't locked away tighter than the Lord's daughter. Marjorie the barmaid glides through the chaos, her tray a fortress of mugs, her smile a warning. She refills your ale without asking, dodging a clumsy compliment from a trader with a flick of her wrist and a quip about his manners smelling worse than his boots. The ale's a necessity here, water's a gamble, milk's for cats, and tea's a myth from lands you'll never see. Even the kids sip it under Marjorie's sharp eye because this inn's reputable, or so Hal claims with a straight face. By now the room's a symphony of clinking bowls and half-hearted complaints. A sleepy pilgrim mutters about blisters, a merchant clutches his coin purse like it's a holy relic, and the bard strums a tune about love and turnips that nobody requested. The pottage is hot filling and mercifully free of anything that moves, which by medieval standards is a Michelin star. You scoop another spoonful the texture, somewhere between porridge and regret, and catch Marjorie's eye. She nods a rare approval as if you've passed some unspoken test. The inn smells of smoke barley and the faint ambition of guests who haven't died yet. It's not fine dining, no velvet napkins or silver forks, but it's honest. You're fed, you're warm, and the fleas haven't found you yet. In this grubby, glorious inn that's a victory worth raising a mug to, even if it's just to toast your own stubbornness. You're still scraping the last of the pottage from your bowl when the door of the rusty tankard swings open, letting in a gust of damp air and a parade of new problems. Morning's barely settled in this medieval inn, but the guests are already piling up like firewood, each one louder and smellier than the last. First through the door is a man claiming to be a knight, his armour a patchwork of rust and rope that clanks like a drunk tinker's cart. He demands a private room, waving a hand that smells faintly of horse and failure, but his coin purse is as empty as his manners. Hal the innkeeper nods vaguely, pouring ale with the calm of a man who's heard this song before. Behind the knight shuffles a merchant's apprentice, all swagger, and no substance, trying to barter a bowl of stew with a handful of buttons. You watch half amused as he haggles like he's selling a fleet of ships, only to slink to a corner when Marjorie's glare cuts him down. Next comes the bard, because apparently one wasn't enough. This one's lute is missing half its strings, but that doesn't stop him from launching into a dirge about lost love and stolen goats. Nobody claps. Someone throws a crust, possibly in self-defence. A monk follows blessing the benches with a solemn nod, though his eyes linger on the bread like it's a sin he's willing to risk. Within minutes he's nibbling a crust, explaining it's not gluttony if the loaf's already broken. The room's filling fast, a clash of egos and odours, wet socks drying by the hearth, a knife being sharpened for no clear reason, and a child chasing that cursed goose between tables. You shift on your wobbly stool, the ale in your mug sloshing, and catch a whiff of ambition mixed with despair. This inn's a magnet for dreamers, drifters, and folks who've lost bets with fate, and every one of them thinks they're the hero of the story. Hal stands behind the counter, wiping it with a rag that's seen better centuries, his face a map of resignation and grit. Marjorie weaves through the chaos, her tray steady, her tongue sharper than the knight's dull sword. She dodges a monk's sermon and a bard's bad rhyme with equal grace, her stare enough to make the apprentice drop his buttons. You can't help but admire her. She's the inn's heartbeat, keeping it alive through sheer will, and a knack for spotting trouble before it spills. The goose flaps past again, a child in pursuit, and the knight bellows about honour while tripping over a stool. It's a mess, but it's Hal's mess and Marjorie's kingdom. You sip your ale, the room loud with laughter arguments, and the faint hope that nobody draws a blade before noon. In this inn, chaos isn't just expected, it's the only thing keeping the fire burning. You're perched on a creaky stool in the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, a swirling mess of noise and spilled ale. When you realise this place doesn't belong to Hal the innkeeper, it's Marjorie's empire. She's the barmaid, maybe 20, maybe 30, or maybe just aged by dodging bad ballads and worse manners, but she's the one who keeps this rickety ship afloat. Marjorie moves through the chaos like a hawk through a storm, one hand balancing a tray of mugs that slosh but never spill, the other swatting away a merchant's wandering fingers with a flick that says she's done this 1,000 times. Her apron's stained, her hair's tied back with a scrap of cloth, but her eyes sharp as a dagger's edge miss nothing. A knight's boasting about his rusty armour, a bard's mangling a tune about goats, and a monk's blessing the bread he's already eating, but Marjorie's the conductor of this mad orchestra, and nobody dares miss her cue. She's not just serving ale, she's running a kingdom. Marjorie knows who'll pay in coin and who'll try to barter with a seashell or a sob story. She spots a fake accent from across the room, a stolen ring, before it's pawned, and a flirt disguised as a complaint about the stew. Once a drunken mercenary slurred something about her ankles, and woke up with his boots nailed to the ceiling. Nobody's tried that nonsense since. You watch her pour ale without looking insult and noble, without breaking stride, and take an order in a dialect you're pretty sure is half made up, all while dodging a child chasing that cursed goose. Her tray's a marvel, never dropping, even when a stool collapses under a trader's ego. The inn's held together by splinters and stubbornness, but Marjorie's the glue, efficient, not rude, with a wink that disarms and a stare that could curdle the ale. You raise your mug to her, and she nods a flicker of approval that feels like a knighthood. Marjorie's day starts before the rooster remembers its job and ends when the hearth's just embers. She serves stew chases, kids' bandages, scraped knees, and somehow refills every mug while calming a spat over who stole whose spoon. The monk mutters about sin, but even he knows she's the saint of this place, keeping it moving when it should have collapsed years ago. You catch her muttering about poets under her breath, and you stifle a laugh. She's heard every bad rhyme and lived to tell the tale. The innkeeper might own the walls, but Marjorie rules the floor, her every step a dance of low expectations and high tolerance. As she sweeps past tray steady, you realise this inn's not just a stop on the road, it's her stage, and she's the star whether the guests know it or not. You sip your ale, the room alive with her rhythm, and wonder how many kingdoms fall without a Marjorie to hold them up. You're halfway through a mug of ale in the rusty tankard when a battered iron triangle clangs, and the medieval inn's common room erupts into a stampede that'd make a herd of mules jealous. Lunchtime's here, and it's not a meal. It's a test of your reflexes, patience, and ability to ignore the smell of turnips that have been boiled since last week. Marjorie the barmaid rings the triangle with a grim determination, her eyes daring anyone to complain about the timing. The hearth glows a pot of pottage bubbles like it's plotting a breakout, and guests pour in from corners you didn't know existed. A trader vaults over a sleeping dog, a bard swings his lute like he's storming a castle, and 2 farmers bicker over a bench when there's 5 empty ones nearby. You grip your stool, the floor, sticky under your boots, and brace for the chaos that's as much a tradition here as the fleas. How the innkeeper ladles out pottage, a steaming mystery that's less food and more a dare. It's the same stew from breakfast, maybe from last month, with turnips now mushy enough to qualify as a sauce, and bits of something that might have been meat once. You scoop a spoonful, the texture somewhere between gravel and despair, and wonder if vegetarian is even a word, yet someone asks and Hal pretends he's deaf. The bread's a weapon, each chunk thudding onto the table, softening only when dunked in stew, which claims a few bowls as collateral damage. Marjorie weaves through the melee, her tray a fortress of mugs, her stare a warning to the knight still whining about his private room. She serves food, smiles thinly, and shuts down a bard's attempt at a lunch-themed ballad with a ladle placed just a bit too firmly in his bowl. You catch her eye, and she rolls hers lunch as her battlefield, and she's not losing. The room's a riot of noise, mugs clink, chairs scrape, and a guard near the hearth tries to outburp his mate, while a monk hums hymns over his pottage. The goose's back naturally weaving between legs like it owns the place, a child feeding it scraps and calling it sabik. A trader gripes about the stew's flavour, then shuts up when Marjorie points out it's the same as last night's. You chew your bread, your jaw aching, and marvel at the inn's pulse, loud, messy, alive. It's not about the food, which is filling but forgettable. It's about the spectacle. Nobody's died, the stew's hot, and Marjorie's still standing tray steady as the sun creeps higher. You raise your mug, the chaos swirling around you, and think, maybe this inn's not so bad until someone spills ale on your cloak and the goose eyes you like you're next. You're nursing the dregs of your ale in the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room still ringing with the echoes of lunchtime chaos, when the real work begins cleaning up after guests who swore they were tidy. The place looks like a battlefield after a siege, only instead of arrows it's strewn with onion peels, spilled pottage, and a boot nobody claims. Marjorie the barmaid surveys the wreckage with the steely gaze of a general, her apron tied tight like armour. Hal the innkeeper mutters something about mugs and divine punishment, but you know he's just stalling. To the untrained eye, it's a dining room in mild disarray. To Marjorie and Hal, it's an archaeological dig complete with stains that defy explanation, and a spoon stuck to a bench like it's been cursed. You shift on your wobbly stool, the air thick with smoke and regret, and watch the inn's unsung heroes tackle the mess. Marjorie moves, first collecting bowls with the speed of someone who's done this since before the village had a name. Her tray clinks with every step, a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat, while she dodges a child still chasing that infernal goose. The tables get wiped with a rag that's more memory than cloth smearing grease into a medieval glaze that's probably older than you. Hal sweeps the floor, which mostly means pushing crumbs under benches, and hoping the rats handle the rest. A boot's found under a stool, nobody claims it, so it joins the pile behind the bar labelled possibly someone's in Hal's tired scrawl. You catch Marjorie's look, a glance so potent it once made a noble tip a silver coin and vanish forever. Lingering guests scatter under it, clutching their mugs like shields. The stew pot's scraped clean its remnants destined for pigs, or tomorrow's pottage waste not want, not especially when nobody notices after 3 bowls. As the last crumbs are brushed away, the room starts to resemble an inn again, not a riot's aftermath. Hal rinses mugs in a rain barrel, calling it purified, while Marjorie straightens benches that wobble worse than before, each one creaking like it's begging for retirement. The goose, briefly escorted out, sneaks back in, eyeing a stray crust. You sip your ale, the hearth's embers crackling, and marvel at how this inn survives its guests. Marjorie takes a breath, her apron smudged, but her resolve unbroken, and Hal mutters, "Well, that's done. It's not peace. Here is a fleeting guest, and already someone's shouting about supper." You raise your mug to Marjorie, the true queen of this chaos, and wonder how many messes she's swept up without breaking. In the rusty tankard, cleaning's not just a chore, it's a victory hard won, and never final. You're barely settled back on your stool in the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, just catching its breath after the lunch clean-up when the door creaks open and a fresh wave of trouble struts in. New guests mean new problems, and this lot looks like they've brought enough to fill a cart. First is a traveller in a cloak so oversized it could hide a family of foxes, his beard a nest for small creatures, and an expression that screams he's about to write a scathing review on parchment. He leans on the counter and asks, "Got almond milk?" The room falls silent, mugs pause mid-sip, and even the goose perched on a bench seems to judge him. Hal the innkeeper blinks slowly, pouring ale like he didn't hear, while Marjorie's eyebrow arches so high it could touch the rafters. You stifle a laugh, almond milk in a place where water's a health risk. Behind him stumbles a young couple standing close but not touching, their eyes darting like they're hiding from a priest. They ask to see a room first, and Marjorie points upstairs with a look that says, "It's got walls, don't push your luck." The rooms don't leak much, and that's luxury enough. Next comes a dusty man dripping self-importance, demanding to know if the candles are ethically sourced, and if the stew's cruelty-free. The goose, as if on cue, sneezes on his boots and you choke on your ale. Then there's a new bard, because one was never enough, plucking a lute that sounds like it's begging for mercy. He offers to pay with a song about a leaky chamber pot, and Marjorie shuts him down with a broom before he hits the second verse. You watch half amused, half exhausted as Hal nods through every absurd request, his face a mask of patience carved from years of dealing with fools. Marjorie glides through the chaos, her tray steady, her tongue sharper than the knife stuck in the bar. She spots trouble before it breathes fake accents, flirts posing as complaints, guests who think ethical means free. The room's a patchwork of noise now, the cloak guy muttering about milk, the couple whispering upstairs, the bard sulking with his lute, and the goose eyeing a dropped crust. Hal wipes the counter with a rag older than the hills, his sigh heavy with the weight of another day. You raise your mug, the inn alive with the clatter of mugs and the promise of small disasters. These guests with their questions and quirks are what keep the fire burning loud, messy, and convinced they're normal. In the rusty tankard, new faces mean new stories, and whether it's a ballad or a brawl, Marjorie's ready to run the show. You're wedged into a corner of the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, A cacophony of scraping chairs and clinking mugs as supper time descends like a storm you didn't see coming. It's not a meal, it's a siege loud enough to wake the dead and fragrant enough to make you question your choices. Marjorie the barmaid emerges from the kitchen with a pot of pottage that's technically warm, and definitely the same stew you've been eating since dawn. It's the inn's signature dish, a murky blend of turnips, barley, and something that might have been meat in a past life served with bread so hard it could double as a doorstop. You scoop a spoonful, the texture, a gritty compromise, and sip your ale cloudy weak, but a safer bet than water. The room's alive with noise, a trader coughs like he's auditioning for a plague, a bard strums a lute nobody asked for, and the goose, because of course its back waddles under a table eyeing your crust. How the innkeeper stands behind the counter, polishing a mug that hasn't been cleaned since the last king's coronation, his face a map of resignation. A guest gripes, "This stew's different than lunch," and Marjorie, without looking up, snaps. It's the same, just older. The man mumbles approval, clutching his spoon like it's a lifeline. The bard, undeterred by earlier failures, offers a song in honour of the meal, but Marjorie's ladle lands in his bowl with a clang that says, "Not today." Near the hearth, two merchants shout about grain prices louder than the couple upstairs arguing over how many fleas they've counted in their bed. 3 for the record, but who's counting? A child feeds the goose scraps, calling it Sir Beak, and you wonder if it's the real lord of this place. The stew fills your belly, the ale softens the edges, and despite the chaos, you're oddly content. Nobody's stabbed anyone yet, which is a medieval win. Marjorie weaves through the madness, her tray a shield, her glare a sword. She dodges a monk's sermon, a trader's bad joke, and the bard's attempt at a second verse with the grace of a dancer who's had enough. You catch her rolling her eyes at a knight still whining about his private room, and you stifle a grin. She's the inn's heartbeat, keeping it pumping through sheer will. The room smells of smoke, sweat, and turnips that have given up, but it's alive, messy and warm. Hal watches his patrons like a shepherd with a flock of drunk sheep, knowing someone's bound to spill ale, fall asleep mid-bite, or challenge the goose to a duel. You raise your mug, the noise wrapping around you like a cloak, and think, maybe this inn's charm is its chaos, loud, flawed, and stubbornly human. Supper's not gourmet, but it's here, and that's enough to keep the fire burning. You're slouched on a wobbly stool in the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, settling into a post-supper haze when the evening's real show kicks off entertainment, if you can call it that, as structured as a drunk goat's dance. The hearth crackles, casting shadows on the sticky floor, and the air's thick with ale fumes and the faint whiff of turnips that'll haunt you till dawn. No one's planned this chaos. It just unfolds a mix of bad talent, worse ideas, and a crowd too full of stew to care. The bard, because he's still here like a flea you can't shake, clears his throat and plucks his lute, announcing a ballad about the fair lady of Festerwell and her troll husband. Half the room cheers, half groans, and the goose sneezes, which might be a review. You sip your ale, bracing for 6 verses of questionable rhymes, and wonder if earplugs are medieval yet. Across the room, 2 old mates slur through a riddle contest, their rules as clear as the pottage. One riddle's about a cow, another's a recipe for bread, and you're pretty sure they're inventing it on the spot. A monk near the hearth hums psalms loud enough to drown them out, his piety clashing with the dice game starting nearby. The dice are chipped, possibly cursed, and bets include coins, a button, and a sock. Nobody claims its value's debated, like it's a holy relic. Marjorie circles like a hawk. Her tray steady, her eyes scanning for trouble, spilled ale brawls, or anyone dumb enough to climb a table. She catches the bard mid-gesture about to leap onto a bench, and her glare sends him scurrying back to his stool. You grin, she's the inn's law, and nobody's breaking it tonight. A shy traveller pulls out a flute, plays 3 sweet notes, then gets head-butted by the goose. The crowd roars, and you clap, because why not? This isn't a royal court with harps and grace. It's raw loud and occasionally illegal in stricter towns. Hal leans on the counter, nursing his own mug, his face saying he's seen this all before and will again. The bard hits a verse about sock theft, the dice players argue over a roll, and the monk's now singing hymns off-key. You lean back the room, a tapestry of noise and nonsense, and feel oddly at home. It's not polished, but it's real, a snapshot of medieval life where joy's as stubborn as the fleas. Someone snores into their mug, another scrawls a soot-drawn tattoo on a friend's arm, and you raise your ale to the chaos. In the rusty tankard, entertainment's not about talent. It's about surviving the night with a story to tell and maybe a crust to dodge when the bard tries again. You're slumped on a creaky stool in the rusty tankard, The medieval inn's common room bathed in the dim glow of dying embers as the night stumbles toward its end. Closing time isn't announced with a bell or a polite nudge, it's a slow, wobbly collapse like a cart losing its wheels. The bard, that relentless optimist, finally loses his crowd when he swaps lyrics for dramatic throat-clearing, earning a crust lobbed at his head applause or a plea nobody's sure. Guests start to fade, not from ale, but from the sheer weight of pottage settling in their guts. A merchant leans so far back he becomes one with his stool, his mate using him as a footrest without comment. You sip your ale, the air thick with smoke and the faint whiff of turnips that'll linger in your cloak till spring, and watch the inn wind down like a tired beast. Marjorie the barmaid stacks mugs into a fortress, her single raised eyebrow, a silent command, wrap it up or grab a broom. She's the inn's pulse, still steady when everyone else is fraying. A peddler, undeterred by the darkened hearth, demands a light snack, dreaming of roast duck but getting bread and a glare that could curdle milk. He chews slowly, muttering about standards, while the goose, somehow still here, curls by the embers, its presence less rule-breaking, and more tradition now. Hal the innkeeper shuffles through his rounds, poking the fire and nudging a snoring trader off a table onto a bench, with the finesse of a man who's done this for decades. You catch him eyeing the room, his face a mix of exhaustion and quiet pride. This chaos is his, and he wouldn't trade it, not really. A couple staggers upstairs, bumping every beam, destined to gripe about noise they'll make themselves. The room empties in waves, a tide of yawns, hiccups and cloaks dragged across sticky floors. Laughter fades, mugs clink one last time, and a boot drops upstairs, startling the goose into a sigh. You lean back, the inn quieter now, though never silent. A mug rolls off a table, someone mutters about taxes in their sleep. Marjorie sweeps past her tray empty, but her resolve ironclad, and you raise your mug to her, the queen of this crumbling kingdom. Hal mutters something about tomorrow's stew, and you know it'll be the same, just older. The rusty tankard's not peaceful, but it's alive, a haven where guests are loud, messy, and occasionally horizontal. Closing time's not an end, it's a pause, a breath before the next round of chaos kicks the door open. You finish your ale, the embers fading, and wonder how this place keeps standing. Spoiler, it's Marjorie. You've just drained your mug in the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, now a shadowy husk of its earlier chaos, when you face the final hurdle of the night climbing the stairs to bed. It's not a journey. It's an act of faith, each step creaking like it's debating collapse, the banister wobbling as if it's had too much ale. You grip it anyway, boots scuffing wood, worn smooth by centuries of drunks, and pray the staircase doesn't retire mid-climb. The air's heavy with smoke, sweat, and the ghost of pottage, and every groan from the beams makes you wonder if you're headed to a bed or a trapdoor. You're not alone. A merchant stumbles ahead, muttering about his lost button, while behind you a pilgrim hums a hymn-off key, clutching a candle that's more wax than flame. This isn't a climb, it's a pilgrimage, and the reward's questionable at best. At the top, the inn's upstairs is a warren of rooms, most shared, unless you're rich or loud enough to bluff it. You duck into the communal dormitory, a dim space crammed with wooden bed frames, stuffed with straw that rustles like it's plotting escape. Blankets are thin pillows, a myth unless you fold your cloak just right, and privacy. That's a fairy tale. You pick a bed, third from the left, least likely to collapse, and lie down the straw, poking through like it's personal. Around you, strangers sprawl inches apart, a symphony of snores kicking off before your head hits the cloak pillow. It's not gentle snoring, it's a medieval roar echoing off beams like a boar's trapped in the rafters. Someone talks in their sleep about fish, another mumbles about taxes, and the chamber pot hidden behind a curtain that fools nobody sits like a shared curse. You pull your cloak over your head, muffling the chaos, but it's no use. The guy next bed's humming through his nose, and it's unsettlingly rhythmic. Despite the noise, the smells damp wool, warm goat, and ale-soaked breath, there's a strange comfort here. These beds aren't soft, the air's not fresh, but you're under a roof, warmish and mostly goat-free, which is luxury by medieval standards. You shift straw-jabbing your ribs and hear someone stumble in arguing over whose bed they've claimed. It's settled by whoever smells worse, and the loser shuffles off muttering. You close your eyes, the inn creaking around you, and feel the weight of a dozen lives under these crooked beams, travellers, dreamers, fools, all snoring in uneasy harmony. It's not restful, but it's safe, and in the rusty tankard that's a victory. You drift off the snores, blending into a lullaby, knowing tomorrow's chaos waits downstairs, but for now you're horizontal, and that's enough. You're half-dozing on your straw bed in the rusty tankard the medieval inn snores and creaks, lulling you into a fitful haze when the faint flicker of a candle pulls you back. It's midnight, and Hal the innkeeper is on his nightly patrol, a ritual as old as the inn's wobbly beams. He moves like a man sneaking through a den of mildly drunk wolves, clutching a candle stub that's more wax than light, his sigh heavy with the weight of too many tomorrows. The common room's a ghostly mess, mugs half drunk, half spilled one floating in the ale barrel, for reasons nobody wants to know. The hearth's embers glow faintly, casting shadows that dance across sticky floors and overturned stools. You hear Hal's boots shuffle, each step a creak louder than the last as he checks the front door bolted, probably unless the wind or a bard's dramatics have other plans. He props a bucket against it just in case, and you can almost hear his muttered prayer that nothing catches fire tonight. Upstairs, Hal tiptoes past the dormitory where you and a dozen strangers sprawl in uneasy sleep. He peeks in his candle, throwing light on a sea of cloaks and limbs, one guest's upside down and others tucked under the bed like a forgotten sack. The chamber pot's full, as always a grim monument to shared misery. You stir, catching a glimpse of Hal's weary face, etched with the kind of patience that comes from years of dodging disasters. He pauses, hearing a lute string twang impossible, since the bard's snoring, or maybe tied to a wagon outside, depending on who's telling the story. A broom falls in the corner, no draught to blame, and the goose missing again leaves Hal muttering about cursed livestock. You pull your cloak tighter, the air thick with ale fumes and the faint whiff of turnips, and marvel at his calm. This inn's a patchwork of chaos, but Hal's seen it all, spills, snores and suspicious shadows. Hal descends the stairs, blowing out his candle with a grunt that says let the bad stew burn if it must. He checks the coin box, mostly real money, some buttons, and that same old pair nobody claims, and tucks it behind the counter. The inn's quiet now, or as quiet as it gets, with a mug rolling off a table, and someone upstairs mumbling about taxes in their sleep. You settle back the straw, poking your ribs, and feel a strange respect for Hal's patrol. It's not just about safety, it's about keeping this rickety haven standing through sheer stubbornness. The goose might be plotting, the beams might creak, but Hal's out there guarding the night. You close your eyes, the inn's heart beats slow but steady, and think maybe this place survives because someone's always watching even when the world's asleep. You're curled on a straw bed in the rusty tankard's dormitory, the medieval inn's upstairs a symphony of discomfort that makes sleep feel like a cruel jest. The air's thick with the robust perfume of unwashed socks, warm goat, and ale-soaked breath, and the snores. The snores are a layered masterpiece, from a merchant's hiccuping sputters to a pilgrim's roar that rattles the beams like a storm's brewing. You shift straw, jabbing your side like it's got a grudge, and try to ignore the guy next bed whispering, "No, my lord," in a tone that's either a dream or a very bad date. The bed frame creaks with every toss, and you're half convinced it's haunted, either that or the twigs in the mattress are staging a revolt. Outside, an owl hoots through the open shutter, invited in by someone who thought fresh air was worth the wildlife. You pull your cloak over your head, but it's no match for the chaos. The room's a furnace, too many bodies packed close, turning the dormitory into a summer barn. Blankets are kicked off cloaks shed, and the heat's only rivalled by the smell, a heady mix of stew digestion, and that cursed goat now snoring under someone's bed like it's the inn's true master. You hear a thud, a boot hitting the floor, nobody stirring, and someone stumbles to the chamber pot muttering about stew like it's a personal betrayal. The curtain hiding it fools no one. It's everyone's problem, and you pray it's not your turn. A guest wakes swearing it's morning, only to be shushed back by a grunt from the darkness. You'd laugh if you weren't so tired, the straw poking through your dreams. Marjorie, sleeping in her back room, has ears tuned for trouble, crashes raised voices, or lute music after hours. But for now, it's just the hum of human misery. Yet there's something oddly comforting in this restless mess. You're not alone. 12 strangers from knights to nobodies share this creaky refuge, their snores a grudging harmony. The inn's not peaceful, but it's safe, warmish, and mostly free of owls, which counts as luxury. Hal's downstairs, slumped in a chair, shaped like his spine, dreaming of silence he'll never get. You close your eyes, the snores blending into a bizarre lullaby, and think maybe sleep's not the point. In the rusty tankard, being horizontal is the win of fleeting victory against the chaos waiting downstairs. The owl hoots again, the goat sighs, and you drift off, or at least try, knowing tomorrow's pottage is already simmering ready to start the madness anew. You're jolted awake in the rusty tankard's dormitory, the medieval inn's straw bed stabbing your back like it's settling a score, as the first murky grey of dawn, or maybe just an ambitious moon, creeps through the shutter. The room stirs not with grace, but with the clumsy chaos of a barn where someone left the gate open. Feet hit the floor with groans as if waking up is a personal offence, and a merchant's dramatic moan suggests he didn't sign up for this hour. You blink the air thick with last night's ale and the stubborn scent of turnips, and hear someone rummaging for a missing boot found on the hearth, somehow though the goose curled by a bench isn't confessing. The dormitory empties in waves, merchants with coin purses clutched tight, a monk muttering blessings over his blisters, and a pilgrim still denying he snored loud enough to wake the village. You pull your cloak around you, the straw rustling, and wonder how anyone survives this place. Downstairs, Hal the innkeeper is upright, barely his eyes open, but his soul clearly still wandering in a dream of clean mugs and quiet guests. Marjorie sweeps in, wrapped in a shawl, and fueled by sheer grit, her gaze scanning the overnight wreckage, 2 overturned stools, a missing candle and jam smeared on the broom handle because, of course, she's the inn's heartbeat, already tallying the chaos while Hal nurses an ale like it's his only friend. Questions start flying. Has anyone seen my satchel? Did I pay last night? Is this my goat? And Marjorie answers each with a slow blink and a flat, maybe her patience thinner than the inn's blankets. A trader swears he didn't spill that ale, another denies snoring, and the bard, bleary-eyed, claims he didn't touch the monk's sandals. You stifle a laugh as Marjorie spots a ladle in someone's belt, her glare making denials crumble faster than the bread. The inn's waking up, creaky and cantankerous, but alive. Breakfast is brewing pottage naturally reheated with a prayer and a pinch of salt. The hearth crackles, the floors sticky, and a bench lists left like it's done with the day already. You shuffle downstairs, dodging a child chasing the goose, and catch Marjorie's eye. She's not answering questions before sunrise, and you respect that. Hal mutters, "Could be worse, though. You're not sure how." Outside, a rooster crows a smith's hammer, clangs too loud for dawn, and the world stirring, ready to flood the inn with new faces. You grab a mug, the air buzzing with the promise of chaos, and think, maybe this is the inn's magic. It's a mess, but it's home, at least for now. The cycle's starting again, and you're part of it, whether you're ready or not. You're nursing a fresh mug of ale in the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, catching its breath after dawn's grumbling start when the door swings open and the cycle kicks off again. A farmer stomps in, dragging a sack of maybe vegetables, his boots, leaving a trail of mud that Marjorie's already glaring at. Behind him, a woman in a travel cloak flashes a smile that says she's about to haggle over prices, and a knight with a dented helmet bellows for a room like he's storming a castle. You lean back, the hearth's embers crackling the air thick with smoke and the eternal whiff of pottage, and watch the inn come alive with the same chaos it's hosted for years. Hal the innkeeper sips his ale like it's a family heirloom, his face etched with the kind of optimism that only comes from surviving worse. Marjorie reties her apron, ready to rule this kingdom of splinters and stubbornness. The knight demands a vegan option and the room freezes, mugs pause, the goose tilts its head, and Marjorie's eyebrow hits the rafters. Hal pours ale, pretending he didn't hear, while the farmer unloads turnips that look suspiciously like last week's stew. Coins change hands, questions fly. Where's the privy? Is the ale fresh? And answers stay vague, because precision's a luxury this inn can't afford. You watch Marjorie dodge a bard's attempt at a morning ballad with a broom, her tray steady as she refills mugs and shuts down complaints with a quip sharper than the kitchen knife. The room's a tapestry of noise, the woman haggles over a bowl's price. The knight brags about battles he probably didn't fight, and the goose, possibly with a spare key, sneaks under a table. You raise your mug, the inn's pulse quickening, and feel its strange pull, a haven where mistakes are swept up with the crumbs, no questions asked before breakfast. This place doesn't change. The stew's a mystery, the guests are loud, and the goat's probably plotting a coup. Yet they keep coming back, drawn by the warmth, the chaos, or maybe just the lack of better options. Hal mutters. Not too bad, though the wobbly bench begs to differ. Marjorie stirs the pottage pot, adding water and faith as a cart rattles by outside and the village wakes with a smith's hammer and a rooster's ego. You sip your ale, the room filling with new faces, dreamers, drifters and fools who think they're charming. The rusty tankard's not a destination. It's a cycle, a stubborn rhythm of spill songs and second chances. You catch Marjorie's eye, her nod a rare approval, and realise this inn's magic is its refusal to quit. Another day's begun, and whether it's a brawl or a ballad, you're in it ready or not. You're lingering over a final mug of ale in the rusty tankard, the medieval inn's common room, settling into a rare moment of quiet, the hearth's embers glowing like the last breaths of the day. The chaos has ebbed. guests gone, goose escorted out, pottage pot scraped clean, and you're left with the inn's stubborn heartbeat, a rhythm of creaks, clinks, and the faint whiff of turnips that'll haunt your cloak till next week. Hal the innkeeper leans on the counter, his face a map of wrinkles and grit, muttering, "Well, that wasn't too bad, though." The wobbly bench and sticky floor beg to differ. Marjorie the barmaid sweeps past with a tray of spoons, her apron smudged but her gaze unbroken, the queen of this rickety kingdom. You look around the air thick with smoke and stories and realise this inn isn't just a stop on the road, it's a stubborn, messy miracle that keeps standing against all odds. This place is no fairy tale. Forget polished taverns with candlelit charm. The rusty tankard's a gritty haven where ale's weak, but safe bread's a weapon, and fleas are loyal tenants. Yet there's a strange magic here woven into the chaos of spilled mugs, bad ballads, and guests who think they're charming. It's in Hal's quiet pride stoking the fire through every disaster, and Marjorie's sharp wit dodging poets and drunks with equal grace. The inn's a stage for humanity's quirks, knights with rusty dreams, bards with broken lutes, monks blessing bread they shouldn't eat, and somehow it holds them all. You sip your ale, the room's shadows dancing, and think of the travellers who've passed through, each leaving a mark from a lost boot to a soot-drawn doodle on the wall. This inn doesn't judge. It sweeps up your mistakes with the crumbs and asks no questions before breakfast. As you rise, boots sticking to the floor, you catch Marjorie's nod, a rare approval that feels like a medal. Outside, the village hums with a smith's hammer, and a rooster's ego ready to flood the inn with new faces. The rusty tankard won't change. The stew'll stay mysterious, the goose'll sneak back, and Hal'll mutter the same refrain tomorrow. But that's its power. It's a cycle of chaos and warmth, a place where resilience outshines the mess. You push open the door, the cold air biting, and glance back at the flickering hearth. This inn's not just a building, it's a stubborn hymn to human stubbornness sung loudest by those who keep it running. You step into the dawn, carrying its stories, knowing you'll return if only for another bowl of pottage and a chance to laugh at the bard's next flop. You're standing on a soggy patch of land in the early 1600s, the air smelling of salt and ambition, where the Dutch Republic, about the size of a pancake and twice as flat, is quietly rewriting the rules of the world. This isn't the Europe of glittering crowns or blood-soaked battlefields. It's a damp corner of reclaimed swamp buzzing with merchants who'd rather count coins than pray for divine favour. While France polishes its wigs and Spain counts its gold, the Dutch are building an empire of trade art and sheer audacity. Picture a place where wooden shoes outnumber swords, and the only thing sharper than a blade is a ledger. Before you dive into this golden age, hit that like button. If you're loving the journey, drop a comment with your city and time zone, and maybe subscribe, unless you hate a good story. Now dim the lights, let the fan hum, and let's step into a republic that's anything but ordinary. This tiny nation, barely dry from its fight with the sea punchers way above its weight. By 1648, after 80 years of dodging Spanish taxes and Catholic sermons, the Dutch told their overlords, "We're done," and kicked off a revolution that birthed a free republic. It's less a grand plan and more a chaotic free-for-all, like a market stall where everyone's haggling for herring and glory. Amsterdam's ports are a frenzy of ships headed to Asia, Africa, the Americas, anywhere with spices, silk, or a chance to make a guilder. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, is the Amazon of the 17th century, hauling nutmeg and porcelain while quietly colonising half the globe. Back home, folks sip beer, read newspapers, and commission paintings of their butcher shops, because why not? You can almost hear the clink of coins and the scratch of quills, as this soggy republic turns ambition into art trade and touch of madness. But it's not all smooth sailing. The Dutch are masters of the seashore, but their empire's got a dark edge. Think ruthless deals and colonial baggage that'd make a pirate blush. Yet there's something inspiring here too. This isn't a kingdom ruled by kings. It's a nation of merchants, painters and dreamers who saw a swamp and said, "Let's make it legendary." You're walking streets where tulips cost more than houses, and a guy named Rembrandt makes old men look like gods. The air's alive with possibility, but also the faint whiff of greed. This republic's a gamble, and every ship, every painting, every bulb is a bet on a future they're inventing on the fly. You lean into the wind, the canals glinting under a grey sky, and feel the pulse of a place that's small, stubborn and wildly unhinged, ready to change the world one deal at a time. You're standing by the docks of Amsterdam, the Dutch Republic's heart in the 17th century, where the air smells of salt tar and the kind of ambition that could sink a ship or build an empire. The water's crowded with vessels, sleek-armed merchant ships that make other nations' boats look like driftwood with dreams. These aren't just ships. They're floating fortresses loaded with cannons, cargo, and the audacity to sail anywhere from China to Brazil. The Dutch have more ships than anyone, more than England, Spain, or common sense should allow, and they're not just fishing for herring. You're watching the world's first multinational corporation, the Dutch East India Company VOC, turn the seas into their playground. If you're enjoying this salty tale, give a like, comment where you're tuning in from, and maybe hit subscribe, unless you'd rather miss the next adventure. Now let's dive into the chaos of this merchant fleet's golden age. The VOC's a beast, the kind of outfit that makes modern startups look like kids selling lemonade. It's got shareholders, stock markets, dividends, capitalism before it had a name. And it's not exactly cuddly. These ships haul silk from China, spices from Indonesia, sugar from Brazil, and occasionally a cannonball to any pirate dumb enough to try them. The Volk builds fortresses, hires private armies, and doesn't blink at ruthless colonial tactics. Think less fair trade and more we take what we want. You hear the creak of ropes and the shouts of dock workers loading crates of nutmeg worth more than the boat itself. But it's not just about muscle, it's about precision. The Dutch catalogue their cargoes like monks, copying scriptures their port so clean you could eat off them, and their insurance policies so tight you'd think they invented math. This is trade on steroids and every guild is accounted for, yet there's a shadow here. While Amsterdam's merchants sip beer and commission paintings of their cheese, the VOC's profits come with a cost slavery exploitation, and deals that leave blood on the ledger. You watch a ship unload its crew, weary but proud, and feel the Republic's pulse a mix of genius and grit, with a knack for turning swamp into superpower. The docks hum with life sailors, bartering accountants, scribbling, and a captain boasting about outrunning pirates. You lean against a crate, the canal glinting nearby, and realise the Dutch aren't just sailing. They're rewriting the world's economy one ship at a time. It's messy, it's brilliant, and it's why this tiny republic's name echoes across centuries, even if its methods make you wince. You're standing in a quiet Dutch town, the 17th century air soft with the scent of fresh bread and canal water, while the Dutch Republic's docks hum with global trade. But here, away from the clamour of ships and ledgers, something else is brewing art that captures the soul of the ordinary. Johannes Vermeer, a man with a paintbrush and a knack for making sunlight hold its breath, turns everyday moments into eternal poetry. His studio's a small room lit by a window that spills soft light across a girl pouring milk or a woman reading a letter. This isn't the loud, swaggering art of kings. It's intimate calm and so luminous you can almost hear the floorboards creak. If you're loving this glimpse into the Dutch Golden Age, hit that like button drop, a comment with your city and time, and maybe subscribe, unless you'd rather miss the next chapter. Now dim the lights, let the fan hum, and step into Vermeer's world of whispers. Vermeer's no rock star painter. He churns out maybe 35 works in his life, less than what Rembrandt spills on the floor during a bad week. But what he lacks in quantity, he makes up in magic. His paintings aren't just pictures. They're stories frozen in time, where a pearl earring catches the light, or a milk jug feels like a sacred relic. You can smell the wax on the table, feel the cool tiles underfoot, and hear the faint tick of a clock that's not even in the frame. It's precision. Sure, every brushstroke's a calculation, but it's also heart. Vermeer sees the beauty in a maid's quiet focus, or a letter's private drama turning the mundane into something divine. This is the Dutch Republic's secret. While merchants conquer oceans, artists like Vermeer conquer silence, making the small feel vast. The Dutch love this stuff. Their homes are crammed with paintings, landscapes, ships, even a pig's head with a lemon for flair, because art's not just for nobles anymore. Merchants, bakers, even butchers want a slice of immortality, and painters deliver fast and local. You're in a society where a middle-class brewer can afford a Vermeer, or at least a knockoff to hang above his hearth. It's an industry, but Vermeer's work stands apart, whispering when others shout. You lean closer to an imaginary canvas, the light catching your eye, and feel the Republic's pulse, a balance of hustle and hush, where a girl pouring milk can outshine a fleet of ships. This art doesn't just decorate walls, It defines a people who find glory in the everyday even as their empire races forward. Vermeer's quiet is loud and you're hooked. You're squeezing through a crowded Dutch pub in 1636, the air thick with beer smoke, and the feverish buzz of a nation gone mad over flowers. Welcome to Tulip Mania, the Dutch Republic's wildest gamble, where a single tulip bulb could cost more than your house, and nobody blinked. This isn't about gardening, it's early capitalism on a sugar rush, a financial bubble so absurd it makes modern crypto scams look tame. You're elbow to elbow with bakers, barbers and chimney sweeps all clutching guilders and dreaming of riches from a plant that won't even bloom for months. If this tale of floral insanity's got you hooked, smash that like button, comment your city and time zone, and maybe subscribe unless you'd rather miss the crash. Now dim the lights, let the fan hum and dive into the madness of tulips. It starts innocently enough. Tulips, especially the rare striped ones caused by a virus, become status symbols, think Ferraris, but you dig them out of dirt. Wealthy collectors show them off, but soon everyone's in on the game. You overhear a cheese merchant offering a bulb for the price of a canal house, and the crazy part, his neighbours considering it. Entire savings vanish, futures contracts are scribbled for bulbs still in the ground, and taverns turn into trading floors where promises are flipped faster than pancakes. It's not about flowers anymore, it's about betting on a dream. You watch a farmer trade his land for a single bulb, his eyes gleaming like he's cracked the code to eternity. The market's a frenzy, prices soaring, and the Dutch Republic's humming with the thrill of getting rich quick until it isn't. Then one February day in 1637 the music stops. Someone blinks, maybe realises tulip's just a plant, and the buying dries up. Prices plummet, fortunes evaporate, and that bulb you mortgaged your home for worth less than a loaf of bread. You see the cheese merchant slump his dreams, rotting in the dirt while the pub falls silent. But here's the twist, the Dutch economy doesn't collapse. There's lawsuit sermons about greed and some red-faced traders, but the Republic shrugs, dusts off its clogs and moves on. You step outside the canals, glinting under a grey sky, and feel the Republic's resilience. Tulip Mania's a cautionary tale, hubris hype, and humans chasing beauty till it bites. But it's also the Dutch, at their boldest, turning a flower into a legend. You smile knowing their real empire's built on ships and grit, not petals. You're wandering the cobbled streets of Amsterdam in the 17th century, the air sharp with ink and canal water, where the Dutch Republic isn't just shipping spices, it's exporting ideas that could get you burned at the stake elsewhere. This soggy patch of land, barely bigger than a good-sized farm, is a haven for thinkers, rebels and quill-wielding troublemakers. While Spain's torching heretics and France is fussing over etiquette, the Dutch are printing books like they're pouring ale fast, free and a little risky. If you're hooked on this brainy rebellion, smack that like button, drop a comment with your city and time. It's 5:24 p.m. here, June 22, 2025, and maybe subscribe unless you'd rather miss the next big idea. Now dim the lights, let the fan hum, and step into a republic where thoughts are as bold as their ships. Here printing presses churn like the docks spitting out pamphlets, maps and philosophy that'd make a king choke on his wine. Amsterdam's a safe harbour for ideas banned elsewhere. Descartes scribbles his doubts, Spinoza muses that God might just be the universe itself, and both live to tell the tale mostly. You can almost hear the clack of presses and the rustle of pages in taverns, where even bakers read about optics or gossip from Constantinople. Universities like Leiden and Utrecht are magnets for students across Europe studying law anatomy and how to keep a lecture hall cleaner than a royal palace. Dutch mapmakers like Joan Bleu don't just draw coastlines, they sketch the world's imagination, their atlases so detailed you'd swear you could sail to Java by candlelight. It's not just scholars, merchants devour newspapers and housewives flip through scandalous poetry, because literacy's not a luxury here, it's a lifestyle. But don't mistake this for a free-for-all utopia. Tolerance has limits, say the wrong thing about property law, and you'll find your book quietly banned. Religious tensions simmer, Calvinists run the show, and others keep their heads down. Still, you're in a place where a Jewish philosopher can question God, and a scientist can dissect a frog without a mob at the door. You pause by a canal watching a printer unload crates of books, and feel the Republic's pulse a mix of precision and defiance, cataloguing knowledge like cargo. This isn't just a golden age of trade, it's a revolution of the mind, and every page turned is a small act of rebellion. You breathe in the inky air knowing these ideas will outlast the ships shaping a world that's just starting to wake up. You're strolling along Amsterdam's canal ring, in the 17th century the Dutch Republic's masterpiece of urban design, where every brick and bridge feels like it was painted by a master. The air smells of damp stone and ambition, and the canals glint like veins of silver under a grey sky. This isn't a city. It's a miracle wrestled from the sea, built by engineers and merchants who told the water, "Not today." The Dutch didn't just construct streets, they drained swamps, defied floods, and turned mud into real estate with dikes, pumps, and sheer stubbornness. If you're marvelling at this soggy triumph, hit that like button, comment your city and time, 5:24 p.m. here, June 22, 2025, and maybe subscribe unless you'd rather miss the next marvel. Now dim the lights, let the fan hum, and let's explore a city that's practically poetry. The Grachtengordel, Amsterdam's canal belt, is elegance meets efficiency. Concentric waterways carve the city into neat districts, with boats gliding where carts would sink, carrying goods faster than a horse could dream. Narrow houses line the canals, their gabled facades, tall and lean, built skyward to dodge width-based taxes, a clever trick that screams Dutch ingenuity. You see merchants' homes with grand windows showing off just enough wealth to impress without looking well French. Every building's a balance of beauty and utility, with winches to hoist furniture up narrow staircases that'd make a goat claustrophobic. Brick's the star here, cheap, sturdy, and laid out like a Renaissance Minecraft project, making streets look tidy enough to eat off. You pause by a canal watching a barge unload cheese and feel the city's pulse, precise, practical, and quietly proud. This isn't just about pretty houses. Amsterdam's town hall, finished in 1655, is so grand that Louis XIV called it the eighth wonder of the world, then copied it naturally. Public buildings, from guild halls to way houses, shout civic pride, not royal ego. You're in a republic built for citizens where even the ducks seem to know their place. But beneath the order tensions lurk political squabbles, religious divides, and the constant fight against water's relentless push. You lean against a bridge, the canal reflecting gables like a painting, and realise the Dutch didn't just build a city, they built a mindset. This is a place where function dresses in elegance, where every canal and brick says, "We made this and it's ours." You smile knowing this urban marvel's legacy will outlast the tides shaping cities for centuries to come. You're weaving through the bustling streets of 17th century Amsterdam, the Dutch Republic's canals glinting like silver under a cloudy sky. But beneath the tidy brick facades there's a political storm brewing that could shake this soggy empire. This isn't a neat kingdom with a crown to hold it together. It's a jigsaw puzzle of provinces, each clutching its rights like a toddler hoarding pastries. The air smells of damp stone and whispered deals, and you can almost hear the tension in the clink of guilders and the arguments in smoky taverns. If you're hooked on this tale of power and pride, smack that like button, comment your city and time. It's 5:25 p.m. here, June 22, 2025, and maybe subscribe, unless you'd rather miss the drama. Now dim the lights, let the fan hum, and step into a republic where politics is as messy as a spilled cargo of herring. The Dutch Republic's no modern democracy. It's a loose coalition of cities like Amsterdam and Leiden, where wealthy merchants call the shots, acting like nobles without the fancy titles. At the top sits the stadtholder, usually from the House of Orange, a military figure with just enough clout to make everyone twitchy. Think of him as a king with a terms and conditions sticker. Some provinces cheer him on, others roll their eyes wanting their own way. You overhear merchants in a tavern griping about taxes while praising their own profits, their voices rising like a ship in a storm. It's a constant tug-of-war, centralised power versus provincial stubbornness, like a group project where half the team wants to fire the leader and the other half is his cousin. Every decision from trade laws to war funds feels like a brawl, and you're caught in the middle dodging verbal cannonballs. Yet this mess fuels the Republic's fire. The merchants' wealth drives innovation, their squabbles sharpen strategy, and the stadtholder's presence keeps things just stable enough to avoid collapse. You pause by a canal, watching a barge glide past, and feel the Republic's pulse, a chaotic balance of ambition and argument. These men aren't fighting for thrones, they're fighting for control of a nation built on trade and grit. It's not pretty. Alliances shift, egos clash, and someone's always got a ledger to prove their point, but it works mostly. You smile, knowing this political circus is why the Dutch keep sailing ahead, even if their ship's creaking louder than a rusty hinge. The Republic's a gamble, and every debate's a bet on its future. You're standing in a quiet corner of Utrecht, the 17th century Dutch Republic's intellectual heart, where the air carries the scent of ink and the faint echo of church bells, but beneath the calm religious tensions simmer like a pot of overcooked pottage. The Dutch broke free from Catholic Spain, waving the Protestant flag, but unity's a myth here, faith's a patchwork, and not everyone's singing the same hymn. The canals glint, the streets are swept clean, but you can feel the unease in whispered prayers and sidelong glances. If this tale of spiritual squabbles grabs you, hit that like button, comment your city